Have you ever faced an error that just stops you in your tracks? If you've encountered the insufficient privileges to complete the operation message while using the Graph API, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're going to unravel this frustrating issue together. I totally understand how frustrating it can be when you think you've set everything up correctly, only to be met with an error message. You're not the only one dealing with this. Many developers have faced similar challenges when working with the Graph API. Let's dive into the specific situation at hand. One user reported receiving an error code, authorization request denied, with the message insufficient privileges to complete the operation when trying to access the Graph service client. They confirmed that permissions were set for reading profiles, yet the issue persists. Sound familiar? Let's explore this together. So, what could be causing this error? Often it boils down to permission settings in Azure Active Directory. Even if you've set permissions, there might be additional configurations or scopes that need to be addressed. Let's break this down step by step. And stick around. I have a crucial tip at the end that could save you a lot of time and headaches when working with the Graph API. First, the user should verify the permissions assigned to the application in the Azure portal. They need to ensure that the application has the necessary permissions to access the Microsoft Graph API. Next, the user should check if the permissions require admin consent. If they do, the user must ensure that admin consent has been granted for those permissions. After confirming the permissions, the user should review the code in the Azure Authentication Provider class. They need to ensure that the correct scopes are being requested when acquiring the token. Finally, the user should test the application again after making these changes. They can run the application and check if the error persists when accessing the Graph API. Fun fact, did you know that the Graph API is like a Swiss Army knife for Microsoft services? It can do a lot, but only if you have the right tools, or in this case, permissions. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative solution shared by another user suggests checking your permission settings. They found that switching from application permissions to delegated permissions resolved their issue with accessing users in the Graph API. They recommend verifying that you are using the Microsoft Graph API and ensuring that permissions are properly granted to avoid the insufficient privileges error. Let's take a look at an answer from another user. An alternative solution provided by another user suggests specific steps to resolve the insufficient privileges error. First, navigate to Azure Active Directory and select your registered app. Then add the required permissions by selecting Microsoft Graph. Make sure to choose Read and Write All Groups from the delegated permissions list and save your changes. Finally, grant all application permissions for Windows Azure Active Directory and save again. Let's take a look at an answer from another user. An alternative solution provided by another user suggests that simply granting permissions like directory.read.all or write may not be sufficient. They encountered the same issue and resolved it by adding the service principal to the administrator role. If your application was created recently, you can use Azure AD PowerShell for this. However, if it was created a long time ago, you will need to use MS Online commands instead. Let's take a look at another answer from another user. An alternative solution comes from another user who suggests using the credentials flow for authentication. They found that the issue stemmed from setting delegate permissions instead of application permissions. Specifically, they needed to use user.read.all from application permissions to successfully access user data. That's it for that answer. Let's take a look at another one. An alternative solution provided by another user involves adding all groups, including ID, access, and SAML, into the token. This can be configured in the Azure Active Directory token configuration. You can verify the token using the website jwt.io. Here's the tip I promised. Always document your permission settings and changes. This practice can save you from future headaches and help you troubleshoot faster. And there you have it. By checking your permissions and ensuring proper roles, you should be able to resolve the insufficient privileges error. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe for more troubleshooting tips and remember to keep your permissions in check.